everybody. Welcome to the first lecture of ECON10011 Studying Economics. My name is Peter Backus, and I will be your lecturer for this module. This week we have two lectures. This first one is going to focus on what universities are and offer some tips, advice on your time here to try to make it be the most useful and most fun and most educational in lots of different ways for you. And then in the second lecture, which is a separate video, we'll focus on the logistics and details of this particular module. So today's lecture, I'm just going to briefly introduce myself, and then I'm going to introduce you to your new home, your new community. Whether you're here physically with us or you are at home somewhere in Britain or elsewhere, by now being a registered student of the University of Manchester, you have joined a community. And I'm sure one day we will all get to be together in the same place again, but at least for this semester, it's not the case, sadly. After that, I'm going to offer some advice on being at university and how to get the most out of your time at university. I'm sure you've already received a ton of information about what universities are, what University of Manchester is, some of our history. You probably got tips and hints from maybe older friends or siblings of yours, probably from the school, the university, the department. These are things that I've put together that are ideas and hints and tips that I wish I had gotten when I was an undergraduate student, because I was not a good student as an undergraduate. My very first semester at university, I was on what was called academic probation, because I was having a great time, but not spending a lot of time on my actual formal education. So these are hints and tips and things that I think aren't just about how to study, but about how to get the most out of your 3 years here, which will go by faster than you can possibly imagine. And lastly, the second lecture is then going to be about this particular module, Studying Economics, with a capital S, capital E is the name of the module. So a little bit about me. My name is Peter. Please call me Peter if you're more comfortable calling me Dr. Backus or hey you or whatever, that's fine. Don't call me sir. Peter's absolutely fine. These are just some of the things that I like, some of the things that I don't like. If you wanted to come by the open hours, we can have a discussion about any of these. If you think I'm totally misguided on fox hunting or birds kept as pets, I have an open mind. I'm happy to be convinced. I'm American by birth, perhaps you can tell from my accent, but I haven't lived in the US since July of 2000. I'm also a British citizen. I am currently speaking to you from the cozy confines of my living room in Berlin, where I actually live most of the time. My partner has a job here, so we moved to Berlin last year, and I was commuting back to Manchester when commuting was still a thing. Now, being at university, they're kind of weird places. They're unlike anywhere that you've been a part of until now. There's a big difference between how you learn here and how you learn at schools. There's a big difference in the reason that universities exist versus the reasons that schools exist. And it's not to say one is better than the other. It's just that they are different places. Universities are first and foremost research institutions. So your lecturers, all your lecturers are hired as researchers. The teaching is this other thing that we do that, sort of roughly say about half research, half teaching. But most people get into academia, most people do a PhD because they're interested in doing research, and universities exist in order to produce research. So what actually is research? What do I mean when I say we're researchers? Whether we're physicists or biochemists or historians or economists, we're all researchers. And the key bit of being a researcher, and I think the key bit about being a university student, are the three simple words: I don't know. Research is all about trying to provide answers to questions for which we don't already have answers. If we had good answers to the question, then not much more research is needed. But in fact, most things we don't know. So in economics, just as an example, despite having decades and decades, or almost you could say centuries of economists working on this question, we don't actually know why economies grow beyond an increase in their population. We have some ideas about what seems to be bad for that growth. We have some ideas about what seems to be good, but we're unable to make some prescriptions that say, if you do X, you will get economic growth. By the way, if you hear that, those are the church bells. I live near a church, and at the church, they love bells. So the I don't know is the essence of research. It is the beginning point, and it is the beginning point of your learning at university, which is I don't know. And this is a tough thing, I think, for a lot of people, because all through our education up to university, we're told that I don't know is the wrong answer. We're told that when the teacher calls on you and you say I don't know, that is an indication that you have not done your homework, that you are not well read, that you are not smart, that you aren't paying attention. I don't know is the wrong answer. And when you get to university, I don't know is usually the best thing that someone can say. It's the starting point. It's a starting point for learning something new. Now, it might be something that you as an individual don't know, or it might be something that we as humanity don't know. And universities are interested in answering questions where we as humanity just don't know the right answer. Now, this isn't advice to say when you have an exam, if they ask you a question on the exam, you can't just say, I don't know, and expect to get full marks, okay? They're asking you a question on the exam, they're testing you, they're examining you to see if you do know, or at least know how to go about answering that particular question. But I don't know should serve as a foundation for how you go about learning how to answer those questions you might have on an exam, you might face in your jobs when you're all out there working as productive members of society. Universities are research institutions, but we're research communities, and there are hierarchies, a word that I don't love, but they are sort of hierarchical institutions. But saying that, some of the smartest people I know at this university are the PhD students. Are super talented, super bright, and if you looked at sort of the traditional hierarchy at a university, sort of senior professors are at the top, and the undergraduates are at the bottom. But I don't like conceiving of it that way. I like thinking of it more as a community, that we're all here to learn, and we're all at different places in our journey of that learning. I've been studying economics a lot more longer than any of you guys have. That doesn't mean I'm smarter than any of you. All it means is that I've been studying economics a lot longer than you have. And I'm here to help you, bring you along that path to learn more and more about economics. And eventually you'll probably be teaching me stuff. So we are very much a community. We're here to help each other. We're here to teach each other, to learn from each other, to be open-minded, to change our minds when new evidence is presented that runs contrary to our understanding of the world. And that's what we're all doing here. So what is it researchers actually do? What is my job? The easiest way to explain it is all of you have written term papers or essays for school, I'm sure. Some of you may have taken the better part of a month to work on a particular essay. Some of you, I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but some of you may have taken a couple hours just before the deadline to produce that essay. What you're doing in that essay is sort of a writing exercise, but it's also, in theory, providing an answer to a question, and a question that one of your teachers has posed to you. Say, I want you to provide an answer to this question. Or maybe you have to write this essay where you have to pros and cons of something, right? Well, what professional researchers do, what I do as a job, is nobody's asking me the question. Part of my job is to find that question that's interesting, to find the thing that we do not know about. And that often requires a tremendous amount of reading and talking to people, talking to experts in the field, talking to practitioners, and by that, people out in the world that are working on a particular issue or working in a particular area, to try to understand what is it that we don't know. Because just because I don't know doesn't mean we don't know. So I need to find something that we don't know. And that's where I get my question from. It's not the teacher telling me what the question is. It's the lack of an answer that tells me what the question is. Then my job is, having found that question, and that's a lot of work to find the good questions. Having found that question, my job is then to provide an answer. So if it's something we don't know, let me try to provide a good answer to that question. An answer that I can convince myself of. An answer that I go, yes, this is probably the right or an answer that's in the right direction for this question. Then comes the tricky part. Now, you are the easiest person for you to fool. I am the easiest person for me to fool. I can convince myself of all sorts of things. The hard part is convincing somebody else. That, one, my question is a good question, and a question to which we don't have a good answer, or at least we have an incomplete answer. And then to convince them that the answer that I've provided is valuable. The information I provided in light of that question is useful for helping us understand the question that I've posed. And in doing so, we create knowledge. That is exactly all we mean by creating knowledge, generating knowledge. So this was taken by this guy named Maheg, and it's a really good illustration, I think, of what we do at universities and how it relates to how you've learned up until this point. So imagine this circle contains all of human knowledge, everything that humanity knows, right? Not everything I know, not everything you know, but everything we know as human beings is contained within this circle. When you finish elementary school, you learn a little bit. Stuff that's in the middle, stuff that we're really, really certain of. 2 + 2 = 4. The capital of the United Kingdom is London. The earth goes around the sun. Things that we have really solid answers for. We're all really confident of it. And everybody pretty much learns the same thing in elementary school. We all learn the 2 + 2s, etc. Okay? Then you go to high school and you learn a little bit more. Now it's pretty much the same kind of material, maybe a little bit more sophisticated, pushing you out, gathering a little bit more of that knowledge about what we know about the world, but still very solid answers, things we really have good ideas. So how do you do some basic calculus? What's the capital of Germany? Other things beyond just this very elementary education that you get in the first few years of your formal learning. Then you go to do a bachelor's degree and you start to specialize a bit. So you learn some more general information. So some of you might be taking some politics courses, maybe a philosophy course, maybe history, maybe something else. So you'll gain some other general knowledge around. But you're also specializing. You're learning more economics than your friends that are in the French literature department. They're learning more French literature than you. You're learning more economics than they are. So you're specializing. In Britain, you start this at A levels, right? You start to specialize at A levels. In the US, we specialize only when you get to university. So you're sacrificing certain amounts of knowledge, things that humanity knows. You're not going to learn it because there's only so many hours in the day, and you're going to specialize with this one area. Then maybe you do a master's degree. Maybe you think, I really love this area. This was really interesting. I'm going to push on and learn a little bit more detail, more sophisticated methods, more complex models in the case of economics. I'm going to push that a little bit further. So now you're really specialized. So you've sacrificed a lot of this other stuff, this more general knowledge around here, because again, you can't learn everything, and you've pushed your specialization even further. Then if you're really kind of a masochist for learning, you decide to do a PhD. Okay? And you start reading original research papers. So not popular science books, not textbooks, but research papers, the kind of papers that I produce, that my colleagues, the other researchers at the university produce, which are these attempts to produce some new knowledge. You start reading some of those things that are already established, right? Those research papers that have been out there, they've been peer reviewed, and they seem to provide pretty good answers. Now you're at the boundary of your specialization, not of everything, but of your specialization. You're right at the boundary. And as a researcher, what you do once you get there is you start to push. You start to push on that boundary, and it can be a really frustrating endeavor. It can be really hard. It can be very lonely because you might be the only person that's at that little tiny point. You might be the only one that's there, but you push and you push and you push. And after a few years of doing your PhD, you create a little dent, and the boundary gives away just a little bit. And this, for lack of a better word, this nipple of knowledge is what universities exist for. This is our purpose, is to create nipples of knowledge in physics, in economics, in French literature, is to push that boundary out further and further and further. That is what we call an original contribution. And those original contributions can be imperceptibly small. They can be so tiny, but 1,000, 1,000,000 arms all pushing out, all of us trying to make this little tiny dent, and we make progress and we learn new things. And sometimes you have big jumps. Sometimes you have big leaps. So here at Manchester, they invented graphene, which if you don't know anything about graphene, go and Google it. It's an amazing revolutionary material, and it was more than just a little dent. It was a pretty big dent that we put in our knowledge boundary. Now, this research is a messy process. Researching requires a lot of failure because you might push and push and push and it doesn't go anywhere. You might have a really good question, but realize that you can't provide a very good answer because you don't have the right data. Maybe you're not smart enough. Maybe you don't have time to work on it hard enough. Maybe there just isn't a good answer. Maybe it's a question to which we don't yet have the requisite information upon which to build a good answer to that question. Maybe you're a bit ahead of your time. So this process is very messy. In elementary school and high school, you're not being spoon-fed. I appreciate the work that goes into all of us getting through elementary and high school, but the knowledge is prepared for us. It's accepted and it's given to us, and it's our job to sort of learn it. And then as you go through your undergraduate education and into becoming a professional researcher, things get messier. So I am not here to feed you guys. None of your lectures are going to be feeding you. This first year, you might have a bib, you might be getting a bit messy. That's fine, get messy, because the longer you go as a researcher, the messier you're gonna get. I have file drawers full of projects, of questions that I was not able to answer, that I got bored with, that I couldn't get the data for, that I wanted to use to answer the question, all sorts of reasons. And I've got spaghetti everywhere. It's a messy process. So 5 steps to how we make knowledge at universities, how we push against that boundary. So first, we need to come up with a good question and provide a good answer. So that's a process I just talked about. Then it goes through something called peer review, which means it's not just up to me to decide, I have a good question and I have a good answer. It's up for the community of other academics, of other researchers that are knowledgeable about the nipple I'm trying to create. They will decide whether or not my question was good and whether or not my answer was convincing. So once I've come up with my good question and I've written my research paper, I send it off to a journal. There is a senior researcher, an expert in the field, some very talented person, that will decide whether or not my question is a good question. If they decide my question is a good question, they will send my paper out blindly so that people don't know who I am and I don't know who they are. They will read my paper and they will decide if I provide a good answer. If both the senior researcher at the journal and my peers, the reviewers, agree that I have a good question and I provide a good answer, then this research paper will be published. And that will count as the creation of knowledge. Tiny though it may be, that's what we would call, via the system of universities, creating knowledge within universities. Now, we're going to come back to this process later when we talk about race and gender in economics, and we'll see why this process, this is the process as it stands. This process is far from perfect. So what is my personal research actually about? What are the things that I've spent time asking questions about and trying to provide answers for? So one, I've been interested in what happens when men and women compete against each other. There's a small group of researchers out there in the world that have studied this. So I wrote a paper with some other economists, some theorists, and some computer scientists studying what happens to the behaviors of men and women change when they compete against each other. The first part of my career, I was really interested in charitable giving. Sort of why do people give money away? How sensitive are people's donations to various characteristics of those people? One of those things was tax incentives. So if you're from the UK, you might have heard of gift aid. This is an incentive by the government to get people to donate more money to charity. So I was really curious about, okay, well, does that actually work? Do people give more money because we have these tax incentives? I've also written a paper about whether or not people actually care about inequality, which might seem like a weird question because I'm sure everybody would say that they do care about inequality, that inequality is a problem, or maybe not everybody, but almost everybody. But I think good economists don't care what people say they do. We care what people do, because people will say all sorts of crazy stuff. And I don't think people even know themselves very well and often don't know the reasons that they do things. So they may say that they care about inequality, but what we as economists and social scientists might be interested in is if you do care about inequality, we would expect to see certain types of behavior. We would expect to see people make sacrifices in order to reduce inequality. So the paper we wrote was about do we see any of that, any evidence of that change in behavior? Again, part of this charitable interest in charitable giving, I studied how effective charitable fundraising is. So for every extra pound a charity spends on fundraising, how much money do they bring in? And if so, are charities under or over fundraising as a measure of efficiency in their fundraising? And my current work for the past sort of 2 years has been a complete departure from everything I'd done before, and it's all about sex work, so prostitution. And the primary thing I've been working on is studying the effects of changes in the regulation of sex work. So in the UK, sex work is legal. You can buy and sell sexual services. The law changed in Northern Ireland in 2015. And myself and my PhD student, Brittany, have been working on a paper to understand the effects of that change in the regulation on the market for sex, on sexually transmitted infections, and on sexual violence. Now, I've told you about a little bit about this. I don't know if any of this is of any interest to you. One thing I would tell you is that never underestimate an academic's willingness to talk about their own research. So if a professor or lecturer tells you, come to my office hours, and you don't know what to talk about, ask them about their research. Ask them about their research. If you're genuinely interested, otherwise they can see your eyes will glaze over, you'll get very bored. But I'm always happy to talk about my research, because the more I talk to people about it, you will ask me questions, and it helps me understand where my understanding is maybe not as complete as I thought it was. So how will university help you? I'm sure many of you are here because you think, great, I need to get a job. This university degree is essential for getting a job. Some of you might be here just because you're interested in learning. Maybe some of you are here because you're interested in becoming professional researchers, and this is the first step. But I think for all of you, the state of mind of a researcher is going to be helpful no matter what career you go into, because researchers are fundamentally interested in asking questions, so finding problems and trying to work out solutions, trying to provide answers. And that mindset of looking into the world for problems is what entrepreneurs do. It's what successful managers do. It's what successful programmers do. Solving problems that have yet to be solved is I think helpful in every walk of life. So using that framework to think about sort of what do you maybe want to do after university. I remember people asking me when I was like 18, starting university, what are you going to do when you graduate? I was like, I have no idea. So if you don't know, totally fine. I did not study economics as an undergrad. I never expected to be an economist. I had no idea what I wanted to do. So if you don't, that's totally fine. One thing that can help you start thinking about that is thinking about what kind of problems are you interested in solving? And that can be something as big as how do we reduce global poverty to how do we improve the flow of traffic in my hometown? And anything, how do we cure cancer? I mean, it can be anything you want it to be, but when you start thinking about what kind of problems are the things that bother you and you wish weren't problems, you wish we had solutions to, that can help guide you to what you want to do professionally and what you want to focus on at university. So what kind of change do you want to affect in your world? And university can help you, because once you sort of have some answers to those questions, you can ask, well, what do I need to learn in order to do that? And universities can provide a lot of that education. Now, another place that universities differ from school is that you are here of your own volition. There's no legal requirement for you to be here. I'm not going to call your guardians, your moms or your dads, or your grandparents, and let them know that, Kevin didn't come to the lecture today, and I'm just a little worried about him. It's up to you. And I think the best comparison is the gym. I don't know if you guys exercise or go to the gym, but you've essentially paid a fee to join a gym. That's what your tuition fees are. And all the equipment's here, all the weights, and there's kettlebells, and there's barbells, and there's the running machines and the rowing machines. It's all here. Everything you possibly need to look just like a young Arnold Schwarzenegger is here for you. And you even have personal trainers. I'll be your personal trainer. Your other lecturers are your personal trainers. Your academic advisors are there to be your personal trainers. You got a lot of people who are here to help you achieve the mental physique that you would like to achieve. But none of us can lift the weights for you. None of us can read the books for you. You've got to put in the time yourself. It is 100% on you to do the work. We've done our very best to create an environment, create modules with readings and assessments designed to help you do that. But you've got to do it. Without your effort, nothing's going to happen. There's nothing I can do. So it's got to come from you guys. Now, these are just some tips on how to succeed as a student. And I don't mean just academically, but how to sort of succeed as a human while you are a university student. The first 6 are sort of more philosophical, a little more squishy maybe. And the last 6 are very practical and very actionable items that you can follow. You can follow them to the letter if you so choose. So the first is learn to love learning. That might sound weird. That might sound tautological, but it behooves you to be active in your pursuit of learning and be active in your appreciation of the opportunities you have at university to learn. When I finished university and I got a pretty crappy job that I wasn't super happy about, I missed learning. I missed using my brain. I was polishing glasses, working in a bar and getting ice and being a barback. It wasn't stimulating. It was fun in other ways, but I missed having the conversations that I was able to have at university. So you'll miss it when you leave. You really will. You might not miss the stress of exams. You might not miss deadlines, but you will miss the environment, the learning environment that we have here. So just take a pause every once in a while and go, oh yeah, this is actually kind of cool. I get to read and talk about stuff that I'm probably not going to have time to do later in life. Start asking why a lot. If your lecturer says the world is like X, ask them why. Raise your hand, ask why. Like a 4-year-old. I don't know if any of you have really young siblings or maybe kids. Little kids ask why constantly. Right? You'll give them an answer, why? You give them another answer, why? You give them another answer, why? They're little researchers. They're trying to figure out the way the world works. And from their perspective, they don't know anything. They have no idea how anything works. So they are digging and digging and digging, trying to understand why is this working the way that it works? Why is the world the way that it is? And the more you can ask why to things that seem trivial, even things that seem obvious, can lead to really interesting conversations and really interesting opportunities to learn. So ask yourself why. Don't believe everything that you think. You have a lot of probably very strong opinions about lots of things right now. Who the best football player is, what the best music is, who the best politicians are, what the best way to deal with homelessness is. You probably have opinions about these things. Ask yourself why you have those opinions. Are they based on existing evidence? Where do they come from? Very similar, say I don't know a lot. And this is tough because, as I said before, we are taught through the entirety of our primary and secondary education, I don't know is the wrong answer. And so we have an inclination to, when people ask us a question, we give them an answer. Even if it's outside of an academic context, even if it's just chatting with someone in a pub and someone says, oh, why can't we stop global warming? Everybody has an answer. Do you really know? Did you spend a lot of time studying that particular topic? Or is it probably more likely that you don't know, though you have an opinion about it? So when people ask you questions, feel free and actively say, I don't know. I'm not sure about that. Embrace being wrong. This is even harder than saying I don't know, because this is suggesting that you did know, or you thought you knew, but you're actually wrong. And changing your mind is one of the hardest things to do. I've written research papers that have produced results. It was my own research. It was my question that I had. It was my answer that I provided. The evidence was running contrary to what my expectation was, to how I sort of thought the world should work. And it's very hard to even change your own mind when you're the one producing the evidence. So it's really hard to be convinced by other people. But changing your mind feels so good. It really does, when you've changed your mind, it means that's like the moment of learning. You've learned something new about the world. And Timothy Leary, who was a famous researcher at Harvard who was very into LSD, super interesting guy, said you're only as old as the last time you changed your mind, which maybe isn't so bad for you guys because you're like 18 and 19. When you get to be old like me, it's great. You change your mind and you sort of reset, and now you're young again, at least according to a guy who did a whole lot of LSD. Debate ideas and not people. This one was hard for me as I grew up, became sort of an adult or pseudo-adult, whatever I am now. I would take sort of debates, arguments with people really personally. I would hold my opinions very strongly and would feel the need to defend those opinions. And it took a lot of sort of work and effort to learn by asking why and by embracing being wrong and saying I don't know, to learn to debate ideas and not people, to not worry about who is right in our conversation, but to worry about what is right. And being eager and open-minded and keen to change my mind, because I'm not trying to be smarter than the other person, but the other person and I are both trying to figure out what is right, what is true, or at least as true as we can figure, given the confines of that conversation, which may be in an academic seminar, and maybe down the pub, and maybe in a cafe. So the last one is be patient with yourself. A lot of you will go home at Christmas time or have a break at Christmas time. You might see friends and family at that time, and you'll be the one who's, oh, you're studying economics. So what's happening with this recession because of COVID? What should I invest in the stock market? That's a question every economist gets. The answer, I have no idea. Don't ask me. If I knew that, I wouldn't be a lecturer. I'd be on a yacht somewhere in the Mediterranean. You're going to get a lot of these questions. They're going to say, well, why don't you know? I thought you're studying economics. Be really, really patient with yourself. Economics is a really hard thing to study. It's a hard thing to do well. It's an easy thing to do badly. And when done badly, it can actually cause harm in the world, as we'll talk about over the course of this module. You're going to be studying as an undergraduate for at least 3 more years. Right? So you got 3 years just to do your undergraduate degree. If you end up wanting to do a PhD, you have a 1 or 2 year master's, and then you have, in economics, you'll have 4 or 5 years of a PhD to do. So you have a lot more education in economics ahead of you, no matter what your terminal degree is ultimately. So be patient with yourself. Give yourself time to learn. Give yourself time to not understand. Now, those are sort of the squishy, wishy-washy philosophical ones. There's also some practical things. Okay, now, if you follow these, I promise not only will you learn a lot at university, you'll get good marks. And I know it's hard not to be concerned with the marks. We've constructed everything in our formal education to sort of rest on getting good marks. If you do these things, it will be very difficult for you to get bad marks. So if you want good marks, do these things, okay? Go to class. Now, that sounds crazy right now because you don't actually have class in person, but you have a schedule. Follow that schedule. Watch my lectures. at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays. I think our lectures are scheduled. Or set a time for whenever it's convenient for you, but set yourself a schedule and follow that schedule, adhere to that. That structure will be really valuable. Anytime you have something live, go to that thing. Do not miss it. That structure will be really, really helpful for you because you're coming from a life that's very structured, most of you, where you're going to be living at home, you're going through high school, you've got, your classes are set at particular times, your home life is pretty structured, and all of that has been blown up. Everything is different. How you live your personal life to how you're engaging with education. So your class schedule gives you some structure. So try to follow that as best you can. Read and do everything that you are assigned. I know it's a lot. I know. Use this first year to get into the habit of reading as much as you possibly can. We do not just make up the stuff that we want you to read. Your reading lists we think about them a lot. We curate them very carefully. We choose. There's 100 microeconomics textbooks. I've looked at tons of them, and I've chosen the ones when I teach microeconomics, which I teach next term. I've chosen the ones and chapters from the ones that I think best communicate the issues I want best communicated to my students. Okay, the readings that I have in here are all things that I've read and have found really useful and interesting. They're not just sort of taken arbitrarily. So I've chosen them very specifically. I've assigned them for very specific reasons. Okay? Reading you might think, well, TED Talk is a lot easier, but to communicate very complicated ideas, writing is still the best tool that we have, and reading is the best way to absorb it. So I urge you to read as much as you can that you are assigned, everything if you can. Get into that habit in year one. Get into those habits in year one, and it'll spill over into year two and year three when your marks start to count for a lot more. Study in groups. If you're on campus, find somebody, find a group that you can study with. If you're not on campus, try to find people you can study, even if it's just over Zoom, to study with. Try to find someone that is smarter than you to study with. If you're the smartest person in your study group, you're doing study groups wrong. Go find somebody else. You always want to be able to be learning from the other people in your study group, and teaching stuff is the best way to learn it. When you try to explain something to somebody, it becomes very clear what you do and do not understand about the thing that you're explaining. Treat your time at university like it's a job. Okay? If you think of your academic part of your life at university, which I totally appreciate as a part of your life at university, you're going to learn all sorts of other things while you're here, and I encourage you to get as involved as you can with societies and your dorms and all sorts, whatever activities you can come up with. Meet people, talk to people, do all that stuff too. If you treat your academics like a job here, you will get very good marks, and you won't be able to do any of these like cramming super late, writing essays the night before. So you have 2 hours of lectures with me per week. You should be doing about 3 hours of work out of that lecture for every hour that you're doing in. So for this particular module, you should have about 8 hours of work watching these videos, which will actually probably be less than 2 hours in total per week, depending on the week. That should be just under. And then 3 hours, which is the reading, attending the other sessions that we have as part of this course, discussing with classmates, anything related to this module. Talk to your lecturers. I can't urge you enough. We're doing open hours, so it's not office hours because you can't come to my office, but as we'll talk about in the next video, we have these open hours. So I encourage you to stop by on Zoom, make an appointment, come by just to say hi, introduce yourself. Just tell me a bit about who you are, where you're from, what kind of food you like. I can talk about food until the cows come home. Something you read in a newspaper, something that's happening in your home country. Just come and chat with me. And we can also talk about things that are in the course. Are there things you don't understand? Are there things you fundamentally disagree with? Did I say something that you just think, that's totally wrong, man, that's super crazy? I'm happy to be wrong. I'm happy to listen to your opinion on things, your thoughts on things. So come and talk to us. Use the discussion boards, talk to us. Question us. Expert is a relative term. I know more about economics than you because I've studied economics longer than you. That doesn't mean I know everything and you mean nothing. You will come up with ideas and ways of thinking about things that will not have occurred to me, in part because the longer you study something, sometimes your mental models start to ossify and you become less flexible in how you think about something. So a fresh mind, a brain like yours that's relatively new to economics, will be more flexible and will see things in different ways. I want to exploit that. I want to hear from you and learn from you. So question us. If you doubt something I said, question me. I will never be upset or angry or sad. If you have a doubt or you think something I said was dumb, wrong, or could be more fully fleshed out, just let me know. Okay. If all of that seems like too much, this is the very simple system for excelling at university. So you can forget everything, the last 12 points I just told you. If that seems like it's too much to bother with, just follow these rules. This is the 3-rule system. You have to sleep, exercise, and do self-care. That means like bathing, feeding yourself, reading something for fun, watching Netflix, having some peace and quiet, whatever it is, going to the nightclub, whatever it is that helps you relax and makes you feel better. Do that more than you study. Okay? Then study more than you're partying, more than you're out there having fun. Please do have a good time, but study more. If you're spending 10 hours having a great time, make sure you're spending at least 11 hours studying. And then the last rule is just party as much as you can. Have as much fun as you can. Try as many new things as you can while you're at university. Meet as many new people as you can. Get out there, join a society that has nothing to do with who you are or who you think you are. Try it. Who knows what you'll meet? Who knows what you'll fall in love with? Okay. Now, the only caveat is that you have to apply all of these rules with equal rigor. So you can't just say, well, I'm following Peter's rules. I'm partying as much as I can. I'm definitely doing that one, but I'm hitting 1 and 2 not quite as well. You have to apply all of them with equal rigor. If you do this, you will succeed at university. You will have an amazing time and you will learn a ton, not just in your classes, but about yourself and about other people. All right, that's the end of this lecture. Lecture 2 is coming up next.